Hi, in this video, I'm going to give you 10 tips on how to buy a business. Hi, I'm Jonathan J, and on this video, I'm going to give you 10 tips on how to buy a business. So tip number 1 is don't buy the first business that you look at, because the chances of the first business that you look at being the best business for you to buy are very, very slim. But I see lots of future deal makers look at one business and go, this is the business I need to buy. When you start looking at other businesses, you get a sense of comparison. You start to be able to say, well, actually, this one is more profitable than this one has better prospects than this one, because then you can start to line them up and start to decide which is the best one for you. The chances are it's not the first business you look at. Tip number 2 is don't get emotional. You are looking for a motivated seller. You must not become a motivated buyer. You see, a motivated buyer sets their heart on a business, decide that they want to buy it, and they move heaven and earth to buy that business. And you see, that is where it all goes wrong, because you start giving in on negotiation points which you wouldn't have done if you hadn't been so emotionally involved. It is absolutely true that the person who gets the most emotional about a business transaction is typically the person who comes out of it worse off. So stop being emotional when buying a business. Tip number 3 is only buy a distressed business if you know what you're doing. You see, distressed businesses do take a lot more work than buying a profitable business, and you need to know what you're doing from a legal perspective as well. You see, what you don't want to do is to buy a distressed business and be left with all the debts and the liabilities of that business. There is so much more that you need to know about buying a distressed business than you do about buying a profitable business. So, tip number 3 is only buy a distressed business if you truly know what you're doing. Tip number 4 is don't skip on the due diligence. Now, I hear some people recommend that you shouldn't really bother with due diligence, do it after you buy the business. Well, I think that's absolutely crazy. You need to know what you're buying, even if you're buying the business for a nominal amount and you consider, therefore, there's very little risk. You need to do the DD. Now, you should be doing DD not just to protect yourself, but also it gives you an awful lot of negotiating power, because you end up with a due diligence report that means that you know more about the business than the person who owns the business. Therefore, you can go back and say, did you realize this, this, and this? And as a result, we need to adjust the purchase price to reflect the fact there is more risk or whatever it might be. So, good tip this one, don't ever skimp on the DD. Tip number 5 is don't ever make an offer on a business. Now, that might sound a little crazy. Why would you not make an offer? Because isn't it usual for the owner of a business to say to you, please go ahead, make an offer and we'll take a look at it? Well, they might well say that, but the worst thing you could possibly ever do is make an offer. Here is why. When you make an offer, the negotiating power has shifted 100% to the other side of the table. And this is exactly what happens. The seller says make an offer. The buyer, who doesn't know any different because they've never done this before, they've never got any education on buying a business, says, well, okay, and they go away and they look at the accounts and they put together the finances and they figure out what would be a right number to offer, and they type that number into an email and they very nervously press the send button, and that email arrives at the other end, and the seller of the business looks at it and goes, you know what, I think he could do better than that, and replies back and says, no, we don't accept your offer. And then the buyer goes, you know what, okay, I kept a little bit back, so maybe I can improve my offer, and that is what they would say yes to. So they improve their offer, they send it back to the seller looks at it and goes, oh my goodness, it just went up, that was easy. I'll just say no again. So they say no again. The buyer, very dejected at this point, looks at the email and goes, oh my goodness, I need to improve my offer. The price goes up again. Now, you see what you're teaching the seller of the business to do? You're teaching the seller of the business to say no to you, because every time they say no to you, the price goes up. Now, there are smarter ways of dealing with this, which we'll cover in another video. But the tip is never ever make an offer on a business. Tip number 6 is always exit the owner. Now, there are some people, again, who suggest that maybe you should be keeping the owner in as maybe a 10, 15, 20% shareholder. I may have even suggested it myself at some point in the past. But I can tell you through bitter experience that it's generally a really bad idea. Quite often the problem in the business is the owner themselves. So you want to remove the owner, and as a result, quite often the brakes come off of the business and it starts to fly. And also, it's very confusing for the staff. They know that the business has been sold and there you are as the new owner, and there's the previous owner as well. I mean, who do they report to? Who's their boss? And quite often the owner of the business forgets they've sold it. And when they forget that they've sold it, what happens? Well, they start to run it like it's still their business, and that's not the idea at all. So good tip, this one, always exit the owner of the business on completion. Tip number 7 is when you're talking to the owner of a business who wants to sell on the phone and you are agreeing how to meet and where to meet, there is a temptation for you to go to the premises of the business because it does actually make logical sense. You're going to buy a business, come and have a look at the business. But we're not buying a house. You see, if it was a house, you want to go and look at the property, wouldn't you? But this is not a property. This is a business that is going to be, whether your focus is going to be initially on the figures. So you need to have the meeting at your place of work, at your office, or somewhere close to your office, maybe a hotel reception. Now, sometimes there's a little bit of pushback here from the seller of the business. They say, well, can we meet halfway? Now, again, that might seem fair to you. Well, yes, we could meet halfway. Don't do it. It's the craziest thing you could possibly do. Why would you, before you've even met this person, on the very first phone call with this person, start to compromise? Look at the tone that it sets for everything that comes after this. You are compromising on the meeting. Well, if you compromised on that, you're compromised on the price, you're compromised on the terms. It's a crazy, crazy idea. So my top tip is have your first face-to-face meeting at your premises or somewhere close to your premises. Tip number 8 is don't remortgage your house in order to buy a business. You see, this is what so many people do. They think they need to have lots of money to buy a business. The lots of money is trapped in the equity in their property. They release that equity. They've now got the cash. They can now give that cash to the owner of a business and hurrah, they own a business. It is the craziest thing you could possibly do. What you need to do is to buy a business in a smart and savvy way where you use other people's money rather than your own. Tip number 9 is you've got to remember at what point in the process the negotiation is. You see, everyone thinks that the negotiation is leading up to the heads of terms. The heads of terms encapsulate the agreement, and that's when the negotiation stops. That's completely wrong. The negotiation starts once heads of terms have signed and due diligence has started. That is the beginning of the negotiation. You see, earlier on, at the point of signing heads of terms, you probably don't know enough about the business in order to agree the true value and the true and correct terms. So, everyone forgets that, and they spend so much time messing around with the heads of terms where you need to remember that's not where the negotiation is. The negotiation comes later. The negotiation can be happening the day of completion. When I started these 10 top tips, I said that tip number 1 is don't buy the first business you look at. And tip number 10 is very, very similar. You've always got to have options. You've got to have lots and lots of options so you can say yes or no at any time. You need to be able to walk away. You see, if you can't walk away, it means that you're going to become emotionally connected to that business, which means that you will not get the best price and the best terms. You need options so that you can say, I'm sorry, this is not right for us, and walk away. Quite often, when you do that, the seller says, well, how do we make it right for you? Which means you can sit back down at the negotiating table and reconfigure the price and the terms to suit you. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the subscribe button and click here to watch more videos about buying a business.